All right, welcome back. This section of the video is going to cover pages 114 through 122. Notice, I know there's writing here from our last little summary we just did, but notice that there is this band here. This band is now telling us that it is going to switch from the other Westmore. So we heard his story up here about getting arrested, and now we are going to go over to the author Westmore story. Okay? So follow along. We are at the bottom of 114. Ding, ding. Two bells ran through the mess hall, signaling the corps of cadets to leave lunch and head back to the barracks for their afternoon classes. At the sound of the bells, the corps moved en masse towards the cafeteria doors at the end of the building. I stood up from my chair and ordered my platoon, or his group of people that he's in charge with, to stand fast or remain still, as I reminded them about the room inspection that was going to take place immediately after school. My platoon responded with a coordinated, "Yes, Sergeant," and began to join the flow headed towards the door. I was now a platoon sergeant, a cadet master sergeant, and the youngest senior non-commissioned officer in the entire corps. 3 years ago, I had been one of the insubordinate kids first entering the gates of Valley Forge. In an ironic turn, I was now one of the ones in charge of them. Insubordinate means that he was the type of kid who wouldn't listen to adults, so he would intentionally not follow the rules. So that's ironic because now he is the person who is in charge of the kids that he used to be like. My mother had noticed the way I had changed since leaving from military school. My back stood straight, and my sentences now ended with a "sir" or "ma'am." My military garrison cap was intentionally a size too big, forcing me to keep my head up, walking taller with every step. Our standard motto, "No excuses, no exceptions," in our honor code, "A cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those that do," were not simply the words we had to memorize, but words to live by. With the support of people like Cadet Captain Hill and the others in my chain of command and on the faculty, I had actually started to enjoy military school. They made it clear that if they cared, I succeeded, and eventually so would I. The financial strain Valley Forge brought on my mother was lessened significantly after the first year, when the school gave me academic and later athletic scholarships. So it seems that he is doing very well here at Valley Forge. On my way to the barracks, I met up with my friend and plebe brother, Sean. Sean was from a single-parent household in central New Jersey, had lost his father when he was young as well. We'd started Valley Forge at the same time and lived down the hall from each other. We were among the few still at school from our plebe class. We were the survivors, the old men, who were on pace to go the long haul. We stopped in the mailroom. In my box were 3 letters, 2 branded with logos of colleges and 1 from Justin, my best friend back in the Bronx. I was a starter on the Valley Forge basketball team, the only sophomore on the starting squad that year, and the first sophomore starter in over 5 years. I was making a name on the court, and colleges were taking notice, writing to me fairly frequently. These 2 letters, from Lafayette College in Georgetown, were the most recent. I spent my summers at prestigious, or really well-known, basketball camps, like 5-star basketball and Eastern Invitational camps, where college coaches prowl or are on the looking for fresh prospects. I was almost 6 feet tall at the time, with a quick first step, a passion for defense, and an okay jump shot, but I was cocky as hell. I would sit in my room and practice the grip and grin that would take place the day the NBA commissioner announced my name as the Knicks' first-round pick in the NBA draft. I would pantomime putting my hat on my head and work on just the right bland lines for the press. Bland here means boring. Our team works hard in practice and it pays off in games. When the game was on the line, my team put its confidence in me, and I am just thankful things worked out. I believe we can beat any team on any given day as long as we just play our game. One day, a few months earlier, my Uncle Howard took me out to shoot hoops at a park in the Bronx. I was telling him about receiving the recruiting letters from colleges, talking about how I knew I could make it to the pros. My uncle was so much stronger than I was and would use his size to post me up low and then execute a quick turnaround hook, shot, or layup, reminding me that I wasn't quite in the NBA yet. After he finished beating me in basketball, we sat next to each other on the side of the court and he started to spin the ball on his finger. You know, your game is getting pretty good, and I hope you do make it to the league. Then we would all be living nice, he said with a smile on his face. But it is important that you understand that the chances are not in your favor, and you have to have some backup plans. I took the ball out of his hands, wanting to practice my mid-range jump shot instead of listening to a lecture about my future prospects. I stood up, dribbled the ball from side to side, but never took my eyes off of him, probably more to practice keeping my head up than for any other reason. Think about it, man. It's simple math. Only 60 players are chosen in the NBA draft every year. There are 341 Division I schools, each with 13 players on their roster. This makes 4,433 college players who could declare eligibility for the NBA draft. These numbers don't even include Division II or III players, or international players for that matter. My uncle had obviously been practicing this speech. The dose of reality hidden in the impressive math exhibition was beginning to bother me, so I cut him off and asked him if he wanted to get another game going. A small smile appeared on his face again, and he pulled himself up using the metal fence that surrounded the court as support. I thought about him now as I stared at the college seal on the top left corner of the envelope I held. Next, I slipped my finger into the opening of the letter from Justin. Justin and I exchanged dozens of letters after I left the Bronx for Pennsylvania. I was one of the few outlets Justin had, and my leaving wasn't easy on either of us. We had always been best friends, despite the urging of one of the deans at Riverdale, who'd once pulled Justin to the side and given him a stern warning. Justin, you're a good kid, but you need to stay away from Wes or you will end up going nowhere, just like he will. Yikes. Justin simply shook his head and ignored him. It amazed Justin how easily they could write off a 12-year-old. The letter opened with normal, trivial catching-up jokes, but it soon became more serious. 2 pieces of news took the wind out of me, or shocked him. First, Shay had been arrested on drug charges. These weren't simply running or possession charges either. Possession with the intent to distribute was a charge of a completely different magnitude with serious mandatory sentences. Justin hadn't seen Shay around the neighborhood in a while, and from the sound of it, was not sure if he would again. Just as a reminder, Shay is the person who Wes got arrested with when they were graffitiing their names around the Bronx. So we know that he is now probably going to be in jail for a while. The even more devastating piece of news was that Justin's mother was dying. We had noticed changes in his mother for a few years. She moved more slowly than usual and just seemed a beat off. Justin's mother had Hodgkin's disease, a rare form of cancer. Their survival rate is around 90% for those who discover it early. Unfortunately, his mother was in the other 10%. With Justin's older sister away in college and his father living in Harlem, Justin's role in the family was changing. Justin was now spending his mornings with her at the hospital, his afternoons at school, then running to basketball practice and back to the hospital. His grades fell dramatically as the burden began to wear him down. Yikes. Okay. I feel bad. I was halfway through reading this letter when Sean's voice broke my concentration. You ready, man? I got nothing. I took one final glance at the letter, then carefully folded it back into its envelope and put it in the cargo pocket of my camouflage battle dress uniform. Sean noticed the look on my face and said, You all right, man? Everything okay? I told him everything was fine, but a few seconds later, I spoke up again. Hey, Sean, do you ever think about what life would be like if we never came here? He looked at me quizzically. I don't know. About the same, I guess. Yeah, I guess. Even though I'd grown to love military school, I still had mixed feelings about being there, and they were eating at me. I wanted to be home, to talk to Justin after he left the hospital. I didn't know what I'd say, but at least I'd be there. I wanted to be there as my mother and Shawnee moved back to Maryland and Shawnee began high school. I remembered what Baltimore could be like, and I wanted to be there to protect Shawnee and help my mother through the move. I felt like being at military school was keeping me in a bubble, ignorant of what was going on with my people on the outside. There was a comfortable distance between my life now and the levels of confusion that had engulfed me just a few years ago. This uniform had become a force field that kept the craziness of the world outside from getting too close to me, but I wondered if it was just an illusion. Oops, there we go. Each company was broken into 2 platoons. I was the platoon sergeant for one of them, and a cadet named Dahlia was the platoon sergeant for the other. In the Army, there's an old expression that the officers make the orders and the sergeants do all the work. This year, as a cadet platoon sergeant, I was learning how true that was. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, my day was consumed with thinking about my platoon, taking care of them, making sure they were doing well in class, making sure things were fine at home, making sure the building was clean, and on, an exhausting litany, or like an exhausting list of things he has to be in charge of and keep thinking about. Saturday evening after TAPS, Dahlia and I put our guys down to sleep, but had a few hours of leave before we had to be back on campus. Want to go grab a stromboli? Dahlia asked. The stromboli is a staple in Pennsylvania cuisine, essentially consisting of a pizza folded on itself, a bread, dairy, and meat concoction or mixture, held together with copious amounts of grease, classic adolescent comfort food. I was in. We threw on our dress gray uniforms, including the gray wool pants that scraped every blade of hair off of our legs, and dark blue cotton shirts. I tightened the navy tie that accompanied the uniform. The tie was wrapped in the same knot I'd used as a freshman. When you know how to get there, downtown Wayne is only 15 minutes from campus. We strolled down the barely lit street, gossiping about the antics of our platoons. About 10 minutes into the walk, a red Toyota slowly drove up to us. Thinking the driver was just needing directions or help navigating the dark, signless streets, we stopped and peered in. As the driver's window rolled halfway down, the sound of loud rock music and the smell of alcohol met us. Ooh, oh gosh, this can't be good. What are you guys doing? A slightly overweight teenager with unkempt black hair and a distinctive scar across the top of his forehead asked us. Nothing, I replied. Who is this guy, I wondered. Don't you mean nothing, sir? A voice rang out from the back seat, but with the tinted windows, we couldn't see its source. Nothing, sir. I reflexively corrected myself, even without knowing who made the order. I was so accustomed to the rules and protocol on campus that it took me a second to realize I might be responding to the orders of some random drunk kids from town. I am Colonel Boss's son, and not only are you rude, but your uniforms are in disarray. I'm going to report you both. Dahlia and I looked at each other, confused about whether this was a legitimate complaint or simply a prank. Dahlia realized the pizza shop would be closing soon, so he tried to end the conversation. Well, you have our names, so do what you have to do, he said. The car sped away, leaving a trail of blaring music behind it. Dahlia and I continued walking down the middle of the street, but our conversation had now turned to the odd interaction we just had. What do you think? Dahlia asked me. Probably nothing, just a bunch of idiots. Suddenly, a speeding car came roaring behind us. We turned around with just enough time to jump out of the way as the red Toyota from before came within a few feet of running us both over. We lay there in complete bewilderment, so they're totally shocked, unsure what to do next. The car slowed to a creep after missing us, like a confused predator who'd overrun its prey. Finally, the brake lights appeared. Dalio and I got off the ground, looked at each other, and broke into a sprint, running away from the car now sitting ominously, or like kind of mysteriously, a few yards away from us. Just then, another car came down the street. Our drunk attackers were forced to keep moving. Dalio looked at me and said, "What the hell are we supposed to do?" That's when the kid from the Bronx started to elbow the cadet sergeant aside. "We keep going to get our pizza. They're done for the night, and if they aren't, we'll see them when they get out of the car," I told him. Dalio was not as convinced, but after kneeling behind a parked car for a few minutes and not hearing or seeing any sign of the red Toyota, he decided that I might be right. Besides, he was still hungry. We picked up our pace as we walked in the shadows of the tree-lined sidewalks, now avoiding the center of the street. I felt like I was doing my speed walk to the subway in the Bronx again. Every car that passed made our hearts stop. This is military school, I thought to myself. We're supposed to be protected from this kind of stuff. We came to an intersection, one of the few lighted paths on our entire journey. Only 200 yards away from our final destination, the quiet streets and passing minutes without incident had returned our focus to the oozing Stromboli and not the Toyota. We were crossing the intersection when I heard a voice yelling, "Go home, nigger." Yikes, that's not good. That is super, super, super racist. As I turned my head to see where the yell came from, a rock or bottle, something hard, slammed against my mouth. Yikes. Okay, so we kind of know now, and Wes is making it really clear when he says, I thought we were supposed to be protected from this kind of stuff. That military school for him really is a bubble. He has not been experiencing what he may have been experiencing in the Bronx. So let's find out what happens. 121 at the top. "I just got hit," I yelled to Dalio, spitting out blood and pieces of tooth into my hand. My tongue searched my top row of teeth, scratching against my now sharp and jagged front tooth, while my mouth filled with blood. We realized the car had been sitting with its headlights off, waiting for us. After their direct hit, they put on their lights and screeched off. Inside, they were screaming with laughter. Going to the pizza shop was now off the table. We realized who the target was. I reached into my mouth and wiggled my loose tooth. We moved into a completely dark area behind a collection of bushes to regroup. Dalio, not panicking, said, "Bro, we have to get back to campus, now." My mouth was aching. I was beside myself with anger and confused and embarrassed. Embarrassed to be called a nigger in front of my comrade, and embarrassed by my reaction, because after being called a nigger and having my tooth broken, I decided to flee back to campus. Should I have stayed there in the middle of the street, waiting for the boys to come back, somehow gotten them out of their car and tested them blow for blow or punch for punch? Part of me was aghast when I decided that the answer was no. I'd only waded into street life in the Bronx. I never got into its deepest, darkest waters. But if I'd been around enough street cats to know the code, they hit you with a knife and you find a gun. And I didn't have to be a Black Panther to know that nigger was the ultimate fighting word. This was the kind of knowledge we understood, the kind of code that was so deeply fundamental that it had never been fully articulated. But I had to let this one go. I had to look at the bigger picture. My assailant was unknown, unnamed, and in a car. This was not a fair fight, and the best-case scenario was nowhere near as probable as the worst-case scenario. So I want you to think about what this worst-case scenario could be. Obviously, if you think about it, worst-case scenario, he goes back and fights with these guys and then ends up dying, right? So even though this situation is really frustrating, I do think, and I want you to kind of think about if this was the right decision for him to not dwell on it and not decide to go fight. Okay, sorry, back to this. If I was successful, who knew the fight would have ended? If I failed, who knew how the fight would have ended? I thought about my mother and how'd she feel if this escalated any further. I thought about my father and the name he chose for me. We sat silent for a moment, waiting for any movement or lights, but as we just learned, darkness and silence did not translate to safety. There we go. I told Dahlia we had to go back to campus by a different route, one where there were no lights and no streets. I told him to follow me and began to run through a series of front yards to a dark, empty field about a quarter of a mile from where we started. Dahlia was trying to ask me where we were going, but I never slowed down or turned around to explain. We didn't have time. Hiding behind trees and cars along the way, we systematically moved closer to our goal. The veil of security I thought the uniform provided had been lifted, and now we hustled back in our black dress shoes and stained wool pants through dirty fields and grassy yards. Our hearts pounded under our navy blue shirts. "Where are we?" Dahlia asked when we had stopped behind a large rock, staring at the wooded landscape in front of us. "It's the fields that lead us back to school," I replied. This was our chance to get on campus without having to meet up with our attackers again. Dahlia had never been here, and most cadets never had a reason to. I had, however. It was one of the first memories I had of my school. This was the area I'd run through, trying to find the Wayne train station, trying to escape. "Let's go," I whispered, and we bolted into the woods. Scared and angry, we navigated the darkness, holding on to trees, using the moon as our guide. Minutes later, we saw the light from the cross perched on the chapel's roof, which was only 50 yards away from our barracks. Just so you know, their barracks are where they sleep. The irony of the situation forced me to smile, featuring my newly cracked tooth. Years earlier, I had run through the same woods with all my might, looking for safety, trying to get away from campus. Tonight, I ran through the same woods looking for safety, but in another direction. All right, let's very quickly write down our key events from this section of chapter 6. Okay, we know that Wes, the author, we'll write author Wes, is high ranking, so he's important in military school. We know he's kind of, again, just like this whole book, he's been torn between two worlds. So part of him wishes he was back with his family, but then he also knows that this is a good place for him. Valley Forge is a good place where he's becoming a better person. The final event that happens is he is called, we're going to say a racial slur. And is really embarrassed, but he doesn't fight back, which is good. All right, that was all of chapter 6 of The Other Wes Moore. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any other questions or there's a part that might have confused you, just message me on Canvas, and I will see if I can best answer them for you. Thanks, guys.